In the previous episode in this countdown, I specifically referenced that I wasn't sure whether or not to put the Adonis in third or fourth because of another car, which ultimately I ended up putting in third. And that, of course, is this car. Now, this is a car which many of you guys might not have been expecting to be here at all, because if I recall correctly, I have never featured this car in any of my countdowns or Dream Garage picks before. But we have featured a couple of vehicles from the manufacturer before, and of course that is Panoz. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times that although Maserati is my favourite manufacturer, Panoz is my favourite racing manufacturer, or racing team. And I love a lot of their cars. There are some which I don't love, but I still like, and then there are ones which I really do love. Of course, we featured two already. In 11th place, the Esperante, which is my favourite sports car, and one of my favourite LMP cars, way down in the 40 region, was the LMP, the first generation. This, though, is way higher. Third place is awfully high for a car which hasn't been featured before, especially in a list where stuff like the Zonda F has dropped lower, the Shizetta dropped way lower. So why? Why have I put this so high, and why is it even higher than the Adonis? Well, there are a couple of reasons in a general sense why. One, because I quite simply would most definitely have this in my dream garage. Because to me, the idea of an ultimate dream garage, technically speaking, you could go full like Sultan of Brunei on it and have like 10,000 cars. But what I mean by a dream garage is more like one daily driver, one toy, and maybe a couple of motorbikes. Or let's just say one. Now, you all know what the motorbike choice is going to be. Most of you know what the daily driver is going to be. This would be my supercar, my weekend toy, because it ticks every single box for me. The looks, for instance. Is it to everyone's taste? Definitely not. There are some people who don't like the look of the GTR-1. To me, I think it's an incredible looking supercar. I love the fact that it has the deleted rear window. Not that it had one to begin with, but like the MC12, it's just that style of car. Very much so a GT1 car for the road. But of course, just like the GTR-1 race car and the LMP, it's this front mid-engine GT1 car, which is literally the only one of its kind as far as I can recall, especially as far as the silly GT1 cars from the late 90s go. It's pretty unique in that respect, the Batmobile of GT1 cars, if you will. Now, another great thing about the Panoz is you can still buy one of these from Panoz, brand new. They'll build it for you, or at least they would the last time I checked, which is, I believe, within the last year. Now, that alone, I think, is awesome. The fact that they will still, or at least would, still build you a supercar that was raced in the late 90s, and yet they can still build it brand new now. I just think that's cool. And you could even go on the website. As I said, I haven't checked if it's still there, but you could configure your own GTR-1 Road Car, and it would give you the price and everything. And it was somewhere in the region of $650,000, which works out now at, I don't know, like £550,000, £600,000. Now, that's a huge amount of money. For any supercar, that's a massive amount of money, but if you compare that to all of its rivals, that's actually a whole lot cheaper. That's a lot less than an Elise GT1 would be, if they'd even let you buy one, which they probably wouldn't. It's a whole lot cheaper than a 911 GT1, certainly a lot cheaper than a CLK GTR, which was one of the most expensive cars ever built, and is still one of the most valuable supercars ever built. That's a lot cheaper, of course, than an R390 or a Toyota GT1, because you can't even buy those. So, actually, $650,000 is quite reasonable for a car like this. Now, of course, the GTR-1 didn't have the success of something like the Porsche in particular, but even the CLK GTR had some success as well, and the R390 and the GT1 came pretty close to winning. But the Panoz, on the other hand, it doesn't quite have that level of competitive ability, but it certainly ain't slow. The engine is, of course, V8. I believe it's Ford-sourced, if I recall. It might have been a Roush engine, something like that. About 600 horsepower. The weight is quite reasonable. I believe 1150, 1200 kilos, something like that, as you'd assume from a homologated car. I love the interior on this thing. Kind of reminiscent of a cross between TVR and a Celine S7. Celine S7 in terms of how compact and cozy it is, and also the TVR in terms of the colour and kind of the swoopy nature of the interior, lots of intersecting shapes, which I love. I mean, I'm a fan of the Zonda's interior and the Spiker's interior, so of course I'm going to love a Panoz interior as well. It's oddball, it's gorgeous, and as far as performance goes, it's a bit grey, it's a bit vague. It's the kind of car that a lot of people love, but yet so few people know how fast this thing actually is. And that's one of the ways that it might perhaps disappoint some people, because as far as I know, this isn't quite as quick as you might hope, because although it has 600 horsepower, weighs around 1200 kilos, if not less, which are both great, it also has short gearing, according to Panoz, and I can't recall if they offered a longer ratio gearbox, which they might have. They probably would if you asked for it, but with a shorter ratio transmission, you're looking at 0 to 60 in about 3.5, which is pretty good. It's excellent, in fact, but the top end speed is more like 190. So that doesn't sound amazing, but that's actually similar to a lot of the other homologated GT1 cars. There are very few that went above 200, and the ones which did tended to be the special ones, like the CLK GTR Supersport, which had the 7.3 litre engine, and it could do something like 220 miles per hour. There are very few exceptions. Most of them do 200 or less. So it's actually not bad. The acceleration in particular is fantastic. It literally is a race car for the street, and as far as the looks go, as I've said before, the looks are a big part of the importance for me with a car. And look at this thing. It looks incredible. Love it or hate it, it certainly catches your attention. It's one of the most exclusive supercars. It's a Le Mans car for the road, which certainly ticks that box for me, being a huge Le Mans fan. It really does have everything that I love from a supercar, from a homologation car. It's hands down my favourite homologation machine. None of the others even come close to me. I love them all, but even the Lotus, not a chance. I'd choose the Panoz over all of them. And I have to say, even the Toyota. Even though the Toyota TS20 Road Car is an incredible unicorn, if I had the option of owning that or the Panoz, I'd choose the Panoz. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's just, the nature of personal preference. So overall, this would most definitely get a place in my dream garage as my supercar of choice. But, as I said with the Adonis, it occasionally flip-flops between the two. They're very similar, despite being very different. Super exclusive, kind of oddball, extremely fast in different ways, and the kind of cars that a lot of people will go, what? Why is that so high? And yet some people will say, yeah, I agree with that. I get why it's so high. It's my kind of supercar. It really is. So that's it overall for this pick. Of course, you can check out a ton of other episodes, 47 of them, in fact, in this series. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.